Good evening. For chapter 4, I wanted to get started by doing a lecture on motivation. Every semester, students are always fascinated by the topic of motivation, and they say, what can I do to be more motivated? So basically, we're looking at what makes us do what we do. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through 6 different ideas about motivation. And then at the end, I'm going to tell you some of my thoughts about them. My suggestion to you is that you take notes and that you pause the video and go back if you need to. Ideally, you listen to it straight through. We're pretending that we're in the classroom and I am the professor and I'm lecturing and you have to take notes. So how do you make sure you can capture everything? The good thing, as this is a recording, is if you miss something, you can go back, and you can't always do that in the classroom. So I'm going to start by telling you about one of the first pioneers in the field of motivation, and that was Harlow. And Harlow was doing work in 1949. Okay, he did work with rhesus monkeys. Rhesus is spelled R-H-E-U-S, so it's not like the candy. So there's a little picture of the rhesus monkey. And Harlow, not the monkey, was a professor of psychology at the University of Wisconsin. And he did a learning experiment with 8 rhesus monkeys. And what they were going to do in this experiment was give the monkeys this as you see on the right-hand side, this pretty simple 3-step puzzle to solve. Let's see if I can do this. So it was a block of wood with this is kind of a lock. And what the monkeys had to do was pull out the pin. And once the pin was out, they could take this hook and they could move the hook aside and then they could flip up this metal piece. And so what Harlow and the people he was working with did was they didn't want to taint the experiment's results by the monkeys freaking out over the puzzles. So what they did was they put them in the cage and they figured they'd let the monkeys just get used to these things before they started the experiment. And then what they found was, without any prompting from the scientists, the monkeys, who are pretty curious, they started to play with the puzzles with focus, determination, and enjoyment. Okay, so the monkeys weren't taught how to do the puzzle. They weren't rewarded to do the puzzle. And Harlow was surprised by this because at the time, psychologists, economists, everybody knew, putting this in air quotes, that there were 2 drives. There was the biological drive, which was people and animals did things because they were hungry, so they would eat. They were thirsty, so they would drink. Or they did things, the second drive was an external drive, that there was a system of rewards and punishments, which we sometimes call the carrot and the stick. We do things, if you think about a donkey pulling a heavy load, if you want the donkey to move forward, you can hold a carrot out in front of him. That's the reward. He'll move towards something he wants. Or you can hit him on the butt with a stick, and he'll move forward because he wants to escape that punishment. So that's the theory of our system of rewards and punishments, the carrot and the stick. And so Harlow said it's not a biological reward. Actually what happened was Harlow went back to his original experiment idea. And he would say, "Oh, you cute little monkey, you solved it." I'm sure he didn't say it like that. "You solved the puzzle. Here, I'm going to give you raisins," because rhesus monkeys love raisins. And what they found was when the monkeys were rewarded, they stopped being interested in the puzzle. So this was mind-blowing for Harlow. And his theory was that the joy of the task was its own reward. And Harlow urged scientists to take a look at the results and to look into this new third drive The establishment didn't believe this. He was laughed at. He stopped studying the idea of motivation, and instead he started studying attachment. Okay, so 20 years later, we have Edward Deci. And Deci was a psychology student. He was a graduate student. He was looking for a topic for his thesis. And he decided that what he did was he brought in two groups of people. In most experiments, you have two groups. One is the control group where you don't do anything with, and one is the experimental group, and that's the one where you change the situation. So what Deci did was he brought the two groups in, had them sit in a room separate from each other, and he gave them these wooden blocks, and these blocks are different shapes. And he said to the people, there were pictures of different shapes, different designs you could make with these wooden puzzles. And so he said to two people, you try to duplicate what you see in the drawing. And every day these people came in, there would be different drawings. So what happened was he had people set up, and then he said to them, I have to go out and double check the computer. Because in those days, computers, this was 1969, a computer was as big as a room. So he went out, but he wasn't checking the computer. He went to the room next door that had can't think of what they're called. From the inside, it looks like a mirror. Is it a one-way window? So from one side, it looks like a mirror, but from the other side, people can see. And what he found was people were putting the puzzles together. They would, I'm making up the numbers because honestly I don't remember, but everyone would, in this period of time he gave them, they'd solve about 10 puzzles. Okay, so the next day, group A, the control group, comes in, same exact situation. He goes out, he looks, they solve about 10 puzzles. But the experimental group, he says, you guys are lucky. I have some money, and I'm going to pay you for every one that you solve. And so when he went out of the room, he found that these people were, wahoo, money. They were solving more puzzles. They solved about 15 puzzles rather than 10. So on the third day, again, the control group, nothing different. When he leaves the room, he finds that once again, they solve approximately 10 puzzles. But the experimental group, he says to them, you guys were so good yesterday. You used up all the money that I had, so I'm sorry I can't pay you today. And then when he looks, he finds that instead of, they went from 10 puzzles, and then they went to 15 puzzles, and on the third day, they dropped down to 7 or 8 puzzles. And so he thought about this, and he said, okay, he found that people often do things because they like them, and then rewards can have an opposite effect. So what he said was, what happened on day 2 was this topic was the idea of extrinsic motivation. Motivation that comes from the exterior or from outside of us, from others. Your parents paid you because, for grades. When you were a child in the summer, you participated in the library's summer reading program because you got stickers or ice cream cones. Okay. And what Deci found was that extrinsic motivation is different from intrinsic motivation. This is the motivation that comes from in the interior or inside us. And we do things just like Harlow said with the monkeys, that they did things for the joy of it. And Deci said that humans have an inherent tendency to seek out novelty and challenge, to extend and exercise their capacities to explore and learn. The bottom line, reward has a negative effect on our behavior, that motivation must come from within. So Deci has been a big name in the theories of motivation. Okay, so Deci and his colleague Richard Ryan developed an idea called self-determination theory, which is humans need competence, autonomy, and relatedness. We'll come back to some of these ideas at the end of this. When these needs are met, we are motivated, happy, and productive. Okay, so that was in the 60s. The late 70s, along comes Walter Mischel. Mischel worked at Stanford University in California, and he brought in a group of 4-year-olds who were in the university's preschool program. And what he did was he found out what kids really liked. And for a lot of them, it was marshmallows. So this is sometimes called the marshmallow test. You might have heard of it. And so they would sit these 4-year-olds down, and they would put a marshmallow in front of them. And they would say, here's this marshmallow, and I'm going to leave the room. If you can sit here and not eat a marshmallow, when I come back into the room, I'm going to give you 3 marshmallows. Okay. And then what they found, you could see from this picture that the kids would sit there and that marshmallow was talking to them. Obviously not literally, right? They could see the little boy smelling it. He's holding it in his hand. He's trying not to look at it. Okay. So what they found was some of the children could resist temptation. They seemed to have self-control, and other kids, after a little while, they didn't care. They devoured that marshmallow. Then they followed these children into young adulthood, and what they found was that those children who had the self-control not to eat the marshmallow tended to do better in life. They were more likely to graduate from high school. They were less likely, girls were less likely to have a child at a young age. Both the boys and the girls, or the young men and young women, were less likely to be in trouble with the law. Okay, so Walter Mischel's theory was that it's our ability to control our impulses that helps us do the things that need to be done. I loved this theory when I first heard of it, and it made a lot of sense to me. Come to find out, this is an experiment that people have had problems replicating, which means that other people have tried to do this experiment and it doesn't always yield the same results. So the children that Walter Mischel was dealing with all tended to be children of a relatively higher socioeconomic class because their parents were teachers, librarians, counselors at the university. And people who have done this experiment more recently, because Mischel was doing this in the kind of the late 70s, maybe into the even early 1980s. When this experiment has been done on children who are less well off, they are much more likely to eat the marshmallow or the M&Ms. And people who've done this experiment, their theory is these are children who know, hey, if food is offered, don't wait because you might not get it another time. I read a report, this experiment was done in, I think it was Cameroon in West Africa, and the children waited and waited and waited because they knew that if an adult said, I will be back in 5 minutes, the adult was back in 5 minutes. And that's not always the case in the United States. Okay, this next one is really my favorite. Roy Baumeister is a professor at Harvard University. And he talked about this in the book that he wrote called Willpower. So they have college students, and they said to the college students, we would like you to participate in an experiment, and we want you to come to the lab at 5 o'clock in the evening, and it's very important that you not eat anything all day. So the students come in, and while they're waiting, again, they've got these two groups. I think they had 3 groups. One group just had to sit there, but one group, while they were waiting, they were told, please help yourself to these cookies. The other group, while they were waiting, they were told, please help yourself to these radishes. Now, as far as I'm concerned, radishes are about the worst vegetable. They're just nothing I like about them. Okay, so anyways, after having the people sit there for a while, they brought them in to the the lab, to the experimental room, and they had them solve puzzles. They weren't these jigsaw puzzles. They were a different kind of puzzle. And it turns out these puzzles are actually incapable of being solved. They are truly impossible puzzles. And those people who were able to eat a cookie, they persisted. They worked on these puzzles for 20 minutes before they gave up. But the people who were only offered radishes gave up after only 8 minutes. So Baumeister's theory is that our willpower, in a sense, our motivation to persist is limited. And when we spend all day saying no to things or making decisions about things, we are less likely to be able to complete a more challenging task. The idea is that our motivation gets used up. Okay. This makes a lot of sense to me. In part, I think, because I am definitely a morning person. I have much more energy in the morning. I get stuff done as the day goes on. I feel like eating cookies. Okay. 2 more theories to go. All right. Angela Duckworth is a very intelligent woman. She has a master's in applied positive psychology from the University of Pennsylvania, which is where I would go if I won the lottery. And she has come up with a theory about grit. And she says that people are able to get things done. They're able to achieve great things if they have grit. And grit is the power of passion and perseverance. So perseverance is sticking to it. Okay, and passion is interest. So, she's saying, here are the things that go into, if you want to be a grittier person, or if you want to be able to set yourself a difficult task and stick to it, you have to be interested in it. You have to see a purpose in what you do. You have to put in some serious practice, and you have to hope. You have to believe that your own efforts can improve in the future. And Duckworth looked at middle schoolers struggling with math. She looked at children who participate in the National Spelling Bee. She looked at students who were hoping to become world-class violinists. She looked at, I'm not sure what your cadets, the people who go to West Point Military Academy and participate in Beast Week. And her findings were, it's not always the person that you think is going to be successful who is successful. It's not the strongest person at West Point. It's not the smartest kid in the class who can do well in math. So she came up with this idea of grit. Okay. I don't know. But the downfall, as far as she's concerned with this, is it's a great theory, but how do you grow your grit? And they don't really have an idea yet completely. All right. The last one is from Daniel Pink. Daniel Pink is not a psychologist, as the other people were. He has written a book called Drive, where he is kind of presenting what people thought about motivation and the current idea of motivation. So if you look here, this is what I told you about with Harlow, the biological drive. We do things, we sleep because we're tired, we eat because we're hungry. Okay, and then Motivation 2.0 was the carrot and the stick. Motivation 2.0 said basically what we do is you organize something, you think, you do. All right. And then he's talking about the new one, which is Motivation 3.0. And there are 3 legs of motivation. You think about this as a stool. You have the 3 legs on the bottom of the stool, and that is what holds it steady. So in order to have motivation, in order to have drive to do something, you need autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So autonomy is self-directed behavior, that people need to feel that they have some control over their environment. If you feel, a couple people talked about this in their journals with the fixed mindset of feeling like, why bother? It doesn't matter what I do, nothing's going to change. Well, autonomy is the opposite of that. You say, yes, I believe that whatever I do can influence the outcome. All right. The second point is mastery. That means you have to be engaged in what you're doing. You need to believe that, and this is something that people brought up in their journal, that if you fail at something, you can learn from your lack of success, and you can change the plan so that ultimately you can get better. So his idea is that, you have to have that mindset. I would say it's a growth mindset. I can learn from my mistakes. Mastery is pain. It's not easy. It doesn't mean that, you have to be in agony to do this, but you have to stick to it even if it's difficult. And here's a math word for you, that mastery is an asymptote, which means that, if you remember this from math, an asymptote is a line that approaches, it's a curve that approaches the axis, but it never gets there. So you get better at something, but you are never a true master of it. And the last one is purpose. And purpose is that you have a goal, that you're not doing something just because, right? It's something that comes from within you. It's intrinsic. And that this is something that Carol Dweck, remember, fixed and growth mindset, she calls this a learning goal, that we do things because it fulfills a need for us. Okay. Oh, okay. I didn't mean to click off. So anyways, this was a probably much longer explanation of different theories of motivation than you wanted to hear. But it's important to understand a little bit about motivation here. That black screen was making me crazy. It's important to understand about motivation. But what's most important is to think about, okay, this is all great. There's so many theories about motivation. There's probably one that you say, wow, that's it. That applies to me. How do you become motivated? How do you sustain motivation? And I think this is the big question, and this is what gets in the way of people achieving what they want to do. So even though I love all these theories of motivation, my new thinking is that it is more productive for us to use motivation as a stepping off point, to use whatever it is, whenever we get this motivation, to set goals and create habits. And that's what we're going to read about in chapter 4. Goals, habits, and self-management, otherwise known as time management. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed this very long lecture. I hope you took some breaks. Have a good evening.